going back where we started, in terms of the inauguration of President Trump, and the things that he's been talking about, uh, immediately before that time, things like statements about Canada, about Panama Canal, about Greenland. What are your thoughts about those? Should they be taken seriously, or I saw one of your previous episodes, and I heard you talk about like the shortage of sand, and that's something I've
Yeah,
never heard of before. So
right.
I kind of looked into that a little bit. Do you want to just tell us what that is about?
Yeah, and I was correct, right? I wasn't mistaken
No,
about that,
you're
right? Yeah.
right.
Sometimes I say something and later I'm like, holy cow, that was from several years ago. Am I still
Oh, I looked
correct
it
about
up. You
this?
were
You
right.
know? So, but yeah, there is a worldwide sand shortage. There's a great documentary on Al Jazeera from like 7 years ago or so about the sand mafia,
Jeez.
particularly focusing on India and South Asia. You need sand to build things. And there is a worldwide sand shortage, essentially. One of the things about Greenland is as the glaciers melt, a lot of sand is there. So there's that resource there, but also too, Greenland has the rare earth minerals that are so important to technology,
Yeah.
everything, our phones, electric vehicles, so forth, very dependent upon these rare earth minerals. Um, and Greenland has them. Greenland's place also as well uh, is on the Arctic Circle, which in the Arctic Circle everyone expects to play a much bigger role strategically for nations because of the resources that will be able to be tapped once the ice really starts melting. As well as transit routes and everything. So, in everything I just said, right, comes back to climate. Something we haven't really touched on, but we see how that's affecting these decisions, whether or not these people in power want to believe climate change is actually occurring.
Yeah.
But so what that gets you though with Greenland and why these comments about Greenland and Panama need to be taken seriously is because this an argument is made not just national security about that we got to do this because the Russians will go in there, or the Chinese will go in there, or whatever. And those are the arguments being made, but more serious below that, I think what Trump gets briefed upon are the economic security, and he brings that up quite a bit. The economic security requires us to do this. We need to take Greenland because we don't have these rare earth minerals here. China has 90% of them, or whatever the numbers are, right? We don't have this ability. If we don't have a source of these metals and alloys and minerals and everything else, we will be entirely dependent upon the Chinese, right? And so that economic security argument makes sense. I think it's rather specious, but it makes sense to many people. Same, of course, for Panama, right? I mean, Trump is upset about the high transit fees going through the Panama Canal, which that too has a climate cause because the freshwater lakes that provide the water for the canal to actually operate are low because of drought. That's climate induced drought. And so less ships can go through the canal, which means transit rates are much higher. Trump's friends in the shipping industry and corporations and business, they don't like that. They've complained to him about it. There's also, too, it's easy to pin this upon the Chinese because there is a Chinese presence all throughout Latin America. But that Chinese presence in Latin America is there because the American presence has been so disastrous and ruinous for Central and South American countries that the American presence has been entirely extractive and exploitive as opposed to providing anything to those nations. And now the Chinese are showing up, not just in Latin America, but also in Africa, throughout the Middle East, and providing better options, better alternative for those countries. And I don't, maybe the Chinese are going to be just as extractive and exploitive as the Americans in the West have been for these decades, but that's not proven yet. And
Yeah.
these countries can, in the Americas,
Exactly.
in the Middle East, right, in Africa, can point to the last 7 or 8 decades of ruinous and treacherous and destructive Western monetary, financial, and economic policies.
Yeah.
The order that we set up, right? We created the World Bank, we created the IMF. People go back, read about Bretton Woods in 1944, which establishes the monetary and economic order of the world post World War II, right? All those things. People are saying, no, thanks. We don't want this anymore. We're gonna see what the Chinese have to offer. So
Yeah.
again, American policies being the cause of America's own decline. So I mean that the China, and you heard this in Trump's address in his inauguration. We gave it to Panama. We didn't give it to China. We're taking back the Panama Canal. Certainly, you can make the arguments of national security. That's obvious. But the point being is that Trump envisions the American empire differently than Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or George W. Bush did. And I think this is coming from Trump's own life, his own experience. He's already been, he's been a mogul. He's been an emperor, if you will, a real estate emperor, right? And his view of how it worked, of what works best, of what needs to be done, I think informs why he is willing to change things, why he's willing to, say, walk away from Europe. If you're a real estate emperor, you have to shift with the market, right? There will be times where, yes, you want to purchase stuff inner city. And then there's, the market's going to change and people won't want to live or work in inner city. And you have to shift. And now you have to build stuff in the suburbs, right? I mean, just, even just on a more micro level, you see this all the time with home construction, right? People have living rooms and dining rooms and the kitchen has a door separating it. And then now, no, everyone wants open floor plans now, right? Yeah. So it's dynamic. And I think that's how Trump views the American empire, as something that should be dynamic, that should shift. And so I think it's important to note as well that the Trump administration going forward does not see Europe as fitting into that dynamic. And certainly the Trump vision is it prioritizes China to a degree, the Middle East, one in the relationship with Israel, but also two because Iran is that great white whale for so many. But then Latin America, Central and South America played an enormous part of Trump's speech, his statements, and the appointment of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. If you think of Rubio, you're not going to think about China. You're not going to think about Europe. You're not even really thinking about Israel or Palestine. You're going to think about Central and South America. That has been Rubio's focus. That's where his passion is. That's where he claims his roots from, even though his family didn't come from Cuba under Castro, but from Batista, they fled from the American-backed dictator, actually, right? But so anyway, you have this focus by Donald Trump that is still imperial. He's still the emperor, but his view of the empire differs, and he wants to change it to better achieve his own interests, but also too, I think what he really does believe as the interests of the United States. So the things about Greenland and Panama should be taken seriously. Now, are we going to? Is the 82nd Airborne going to parachute into Greenland anytime soon? I don't think so. Same with the Panama Canal. I don't think so. Could regime change happen in the Panama Canal? Absolutely. Absolutely. Could we muscle and try and force Denmark into some type of joint partnership in Greenland? I think that's what they're going to look to do. Mexico is the real big issue. Mexico, of course, the immigration issue, their desire to deport everybody. I guess what they're going to do is we've got 11 million undocumented people in this country to FEMA. I think that the plan is to give all of us legal people big butterfly nets where we're going to run around and capture all the undocumented people. It's absurd, right? But the thing that's serious and what's really concerning to the Mexicans is this designation of the cartels in Mexico, the drug cartels, as foreign terrorist groups. And you have to remember that Michael Waltz, who is Trump's national security advisor, he sponsored a bill last year in Congress to authorize the use of military force by the United States in Mexico. Oh, wow. And so this is very, very serious in the sense that I know these people think, well, we'll just send advisors down there. We'll send down their special forces, the Green Berets, and they're already down there doing that. I have a friend of mine who was down there with a SEAL team doing that years ago. They've been doing that for a long time. Well, we'll do more of it then. Okay, well, then we're going to have to do some drone strikes, right? And what's that going to accomplish? It just builds and builds. And next thing you know, we're going to have the 10th Mountain Division in the Sierra Madres. And how anyone think that's going to go well, right? So the issue with Mexico is very serious and very dangerous. And the idea that there is popular support for carrying out strikes against the cartels in a manner reminiscent of what Tom Clancy would write about, in his novels. And unfortunately, many in Washington, D.C., that's where their strategic and military knowledge comes from reading things like Tom Clancy. This idea that the United States could enter into a war in Mexico is not so far-fetched. Is it probable? No, it's not probable, but is it possible? Yes, and that is really dangerous. So again, that's why I encourage people to go and watch Donald Trump's inauguration address, because it was very serious, and he lays these things out. And he is a very transactional president. Again, let's look at his role as in real estate. And so he knows he has to make good on his promises. He knows he needs to give to those who have given to him. And so certainly you saw, I think especially the most dramatic and ridiculous aspect of this was in his inauguration address, where Trump announces that we're going to go to Mars. And you can see in the background, Elon Musk flips out. He gets so excited because his company SpaceX will make billions upon billions, right? So, but you see that Trump is going to do that. He's going to give back to those who give to him, as well as, but at the same time too, he views things as dynamic, as needing to shift or change. And so maybe in like what happened in Afghanistan when he comes into office in 2017, goes along with Madison McMaster, authorizes a massive escalation of the war in Afghanistan, drops more bombs in 2 years than Obama did in 8 years in Afghanistan, if I recall that correctly. Then when it's not working, he shifts, and he negotiates with the Taliban. So is that something maybe we could hope for? The other thing, and I'll leave it on this, is that you see in Trump a desire to make deals, a desire to negotiate, a desire for diplomacy, essentially. America's diplomatic service is, at best, you can accuse them of malpractice, but it's been gutted, it's been hollowed out. There's been no desire for diplomacy in the U.S. in decades. Trump is going to run into that opposition. All of his people who he's put in power don't believe in diplomacy. They don't believe in negotiating or talking. The imperial mindset, of course, is we don't negotiate, we don't talk, we are the empire. And so any threat to us, we use force against. They believe in force and violence, not negotiations, not talking, not diplomacy. Will Trump run into that? And the last thing I'll leave it with this is that there is speculation out there that Trump wants a grand bargain in the Middle East, that he wants to continue on with his Abraham Accords from the first term and get this grand bargain that brings about greater Middle East for several reasons. But one of them that can't be ignored is his desire to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think, will that ego of his desire to have a Nobel Peace Prize, because Obama had one, or whatever his mania about it is, will that push a lot of American policy with regards to the Middle East, or even to, say, Ukraine and Russia, gets a Nobel Peace Prize for ending the Ukraine war, that type of thing? Those are the types of things that we can scoff at, but those types of things really have effects in terms of policymaking. The character of the people, right? Their individual decision-making oftentimes has that effect on policy.
Yeah. Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode.